for posterity's sake, I guess, right? So why are you here? Well, why did you attend this, right? Probably because you are an accounting firm that is wondering what all of this FTC safeguard stuff is all about. Maybe you've seen letters from us, emails about this kind of coming down the pipe. Maybe you've seen it just, Googling. I don't know. But many of you, of course, have been reaching out to us and trying to get some clarification and wondering how this impacts you and exactly what you're supposed to do. And so today, we're going to talk about that. Again, many of you are wondering, where do you go from here? It's completely normal, right? To not be clear about this. It's extremely complicated and kind of convoluted. And so today we're going to be talking about, how did this rule come about by the FTC? Essentially, who is responsible for implementing change, right? Regarding this rule, why you should care about it, what exactly does it take to be compliant, and at the end, we'll be providing an opportunity for us to be able to work with you guys, or for you to work with our team to get any additional questions answered. And if there's some help that you'd like us to provide for you, we'd be excited to be able to do that. But if that sounds good to you, can everybody just put a 1 in the chat? I want to see who's ready. I want to make sure that everybody is present. Turn off your cell phones, close the door, get the distractions away, maybe take notes. And again, we'll be opening up an opportunity for you to get help from our team moving forward. So who are we? Well, again, my name's Ken Sakunam. I own North Star Technology Group. North Star has been around for 23 years, and essentially our purpose is to help businesses make or save more money through better use of technology. Over the last 10 years or so, we've been focusing a lot on the compliance regulated space, right? Especially when it comes to cybersecurity and protections. I personally, and North Star as a whole, talk a lot across the country in various capacity to as subject matter experts in certain things around cybersecurity, cloud computing, compliance, and we do this stuff all over the United States. And again, my name is Ken, and I kind of represent this group, and hopefully this is useful for you. So the FTC safeguards and FTC, of course, have been around for years. In fact, this regulation actually has been around for a number of years. But recently, what's been happening is cybersecurity threats have gone way up. Obviously, COVID had a huge spike in breaches and threats and hacking and all this stuff. And to be honest, accounting firms are getting hacked every single day. Data is at risk, in your customer information that probably involves some amount of private, personal identifiable information is at risk. And so the FTC is now saying, hey, you guys need to be putting certain safeguards in place. Originally, this used to affect, the real money handlers, I like to say, like the banks, right? But this has changed, since CPA firms, accounting firms are now dealing with sensitive information. This actually impacts you guys now. And often we hear a few different responses to this. The first one is, well, Ken, I'm not really a non-banking financial institution. Why should I care? And the truth is, according to the FTC rule, if you are in the business of completing income tax returns, you are essentially a non-banking financial institution. Tax return and tax preparation services is listed as a financial activity. This stuff still does apply to you. The other thing we often hear about is an exemption, right? If you have under 5,000 records. And although that there is some truth to that, there is only a partial exemption for some of these controls, and that really involves stuff with the risk assessments, which blows my mind because I think that's still the most important thing that any organization should do, regardless of size. But it does exempt you from certain things like continuous monitoring and things around incident response and reporting to the board. And again, I'm 100% believer that that these controls, regardless if they are mandated by a governing body or the FTC, are still good things to employ for your business. And we're not going to go into specifics about penalties, right, for non-compliance. This is certainly not legal advice, but it's also not a seatbelt, right? There are bigger implications for this, and there are accounting firms that are facing certain penalties and disciplinary action for non-compliance, especially if there is a breach that leads to exposure of customer PII. And I can't stress how much even reputational damage can be the result, right, of a data breach, even if you are not required to put these things into place. We want to protect you from that. But why listen to us? Well, we're just the computer guys, right? The truth is, these cyber attacks happen every day, and we are on the forefront of this. These are just some of the things that we've been working on recently. We had a regional hospital that we literally just finished an incident response for. They had a data breach, some exposure, business email compromise, where we believe someone was phished, credentials were scraped, and they ended up detonating ransomware that affected the entire hospital. The recovery was 6 weeks. They had to re-image every single PC and laptop, plus be able to restore from data. They did not pay the ransom, but it was still a process. We had an engineering firm that was phished out of $300,000, where they also got an email from somebody posing as the owner to the bookkeeper to say, "Hey, can you cut a couple checks?" These checks were 150 grand each. And then we had a regional data center, that was hacked. Ransomware detonated, affected not only customer data, but also their backups. This stuff just happens every single day. We are in the forefront. We want to be able to provide information to make this less likely to happen to you. And if something does happen to you, to be able to have a controlled recovery in that process. And we invest heavily, right, to make that a reality. That means time, investment in resources, tools, education, right? We're constantly going through this process because this stuff literally changes daily. So I got it, Ken. What do I need to do, right? So technically there are 9 safeguards specifically documented by the FTC. Essentially, if you look on the right, you could kind of pull those into 4 main buckets of stuff, right? Risk assessments, managing the plans, training your people, and then building incident response around that. And we'll be kind of talking about these individually. But you can essentially kind of squish those down into 4, but I'll be talking about each item, all 9 items specifically. It's very complex, and so I'm going to try to break this down as easily as possible. And again, you'll have an opportunity to work with our team if you have any additional questions. But step 1 essentially is to nominate somebody from your team that's responsible, right? This person can either be an in-house employee or someone outside of your company, such as a cybersecurity company. If you do use an outside agency, make sure that they have their own cybersecurity program in place. But really, this person needs to have knowledge of where your data is and how you actually access data. Step 2 is perform a cybersecurity risk assessment. And I talked a little bit earlier about how under 5,000 records, you may be exempt from this, but I honestly think that this is the most important task that any organization of any size can do. Essentially is a review through using tools, observational techniques, question and answer, interview style, gathering information to discover where potential company vulnerabilities lie, what data, what technologies and procedures need to be addressed. Again, I know you might be exempt if you're under 5,000 records, but I still think that this is an important step. This is the core, right, to understanding how much risk that you have in an organization and how to specifically implement the FTC safeguards to be able to reduce that risk. The third step, and there's lots to this third step, right? But essentially what the FTC is saying with this regarding this safeguard is that you should implement a certain amount of cybersecurity controls. And I'm going to kind of go into these, generally. Some of this can be complex. Some of this is maybe self-explanatory, but I'm going to go through these anyway. So the first step about access control essentially is you need to periodically review who has access to your data. Do you have former employees that still have access that haven't been deleted? Do the current employees have the right permissions to the stuff that you have in your applications or in your files and folders? You should understand what your company's data landscape looks like, right? Again, take it a periodic look at the assets that you have, your workstations, your servers, your switches, your routers, your infrastructure equipment, right? Log all that stuff, understand what you own. You can't secure or protect things that you don't know about. Third is encryption, right? Essentially encryption is the process of taking readable data and making it unreadable for people that shouldn't have access to that, right? So you should encrypt that customer information, both when it's stored on your systems and when you send it outside of your systems. You should assess your applications, right? Review every application that you're using, right, for necessity. Understand who has access to that and determine if it's still worth keeping. Multi-factor authentication, I probably could have put this at the top of the list, right? Nobody likes to do this. Essentially, it's the process of securing access to something by making you provide at least two forms of identification. Often that's a user ID with a password, and then a second form, which could be a token, a code. It could be a fingerprint. It could be, several different things where you provide a second form of ID. And that's often down to three different things: either something that like a password, something that you possess, like a token, or again, something that's inherent to you, like a biometric, item, fingerprints, eye, retina, etc. You should delete old data. I can't tell you how much sensitive information is on company environments that doesn't even need to be there, right? And often it's stuff that's so legacy or old, it's beyond archive. Review it, get rid of it. The monitoring and planning, right? So this gets to be a little bit more complex. You are exempt from this if you're under 5,000 records, but essentially it's being able to maintain a log of authorized users' activity. This is something that we have to do right now with HIPAA. And now the FTC is starting to play in this space too. So in the event that there is a cybersecurity breach, cybersecurity professionals can go back and take a look and make sure that or see what person had access to what stuff at what time. I know all this stuff can be complex, and the FTC, of course, isn't making this any easier. But again, I'll provide an opportunity to work with our team if you have additional questions. This gets to be a little bit more technical, right? So we talk about penetration testing and vulnerability assessments, right? And there's often a confusion what the differences between those two. A annual penetration test essentially is the activity of trying to break into your own systems, right? And again, this is a highly complex task, right? That's usually performed by cybersecurity professionals, but it is required. Second is to conduct vulnerability assessment scans. The FTC is talking about doing this every 6 months. I think that's it's a little bit too long, I think, between, but essentially, we're going in and determining what type of systems you have and are there any known vulnerabilities to those systems that can be fixed, right? Either patched or provide some sort of method to close that that gap. Number 5 is make sure you understand your vendors, right? One of the biggest things that we're seeing as far as cybersecurity risk and breaches is supply chain risk, right? So all of you guys have certain vendors that you use. Maybe it's the vendor for your accounting software. Maybe it's your cloud computing vendor. It could be your ISP. Even stuff that's not related to technology. You have your HVAC, or if you have an office, right, that manages your cooling and your heating. All of these are vendors that have access potentially to data that could put your sensitive data at risk. So make sure you are paying attention to them and essentially treat them like employees, right? Be cautious of the access that you give. Make sure you shut off access when they're not using it. Just have a general good understanding of what they do with your stuff. Number 6, keep your information security program current. And again, this is an administrative task, right? But something that's still important, right? So this is not a do it, set it, and forget it, right? This is something that requires constant attention, right? Constant updates and reviews. So review your plans, right? When certain change events happen, new staff, right? Maybe you have a new system. Maybe you changed accounting software. This is the opportunity to review what you're doing with cybersecurity, what you're doing with these safeguards, and make sure that they're still relevant. Number 7 is to create an incident response plan. Essentially, this is the fire drill for your business, right? And again, if you're under 5,000 records, you're exempt from doing this, but I still think that this is a very simple step that every organization should do to be able to understand what has to happen in the event there's a cybersecurity breach. That example that I gave of the regional hospital that had the cybersecurity breach recently, that had ransomware across their entire network, they had no incident response plan. So even just simple things like, what is the phone number for your cyber liability insurance provider, was gone or was not available, right? What is the phone number for your email provider? Who is the contacts, right, for your EMR, your EHR, right? So having this stuff documented, even if you're not required to do so, I think is still a great idea. Train your team. Ultimately, the biggest cybersecurity risk that we see to organizations are companies' employees, right? And so the simple task, right, of creating awareness of cybersecurity risk, within your staff to allow them to better identify when something seems, not quite right, is huge. Today we still see one of the biggest attack vectors is email, right? Phishing, convincing some sort of staff through social engineering that they should click on a link, submit their user credentials, right? Or give up some sort of private information, right, that could be catastrophic to your organization, is still one of the biggest areas that we see that could easily be resolved simply by providing educational opportunities for your team to understand this stuff. Finally, number 9, the designated responsible person, right, should be able to take all of this information, right, and be able to report to stakeholders. We talk about board of directors, right, depending on the size of your organization, but that individual that is responsible for managing and running this cybersecurity program regarding these safeguards should have the ability to consolidate, summarize, and be able to report this stuff to people that need to know and hear about it. So the FTC Safeguard deadline has been extended, right? It's now currently June 9th. I know that's kind of a weird, non-even part of the month, right? But it has been extended. And the reason why the FTC has extended this deadline is because of the lack of cybersecurity professionals to implement it, to be completely truthful. So this stuff is important to the FTC, but realizing that it's difficult to find people, individuals, or organizations, right, to actually make this a reality for CPA firms like you guys. Partly because it takes a long time to kind of get this stuff in place, right? We usually try to estimate an onboard, anywhere between 4 to 6 months, right, to get this in place. So even if you started it today, you're probably not even going to potentially make that deadline. But to be able to have documentation to show in good faith, right, that we are making progress is the next best thing. But there is an issue with all this stuff, right? You guys can do this yourself. There's nothing to stop any of your organizations that have IT staff, IT talent, or working with another provider to get this stuff done, right? The things that I want to make sure that you are well aware is that this stuff is time consuming, right? I mentioned potentially months or weeks to be able to get this implemented. It does require somebody that knows what they're doing in this, and when it comes to cybersecurity controls. And honestly, it's above probably 90% of the internal IT staff level of qualifications to do this, right? And the truth is, while you wait, you are still at risk. So you have two options, right? You do this yourself, 100%. You can try and build all of this, with your own team, or you could partner with a qualified team of professionals and work with us. And this is essentially what we do every single day, right? We eat, drink, sleep cybersecurity, and we would love to be able to help you. Essentially, we're not the cheapest guy in the block, right? But our approach to working with our customers is we develop and build a partnership, right? And to us, the definition of a partnership is shared responsibility, right, for a mutual goal. So we tackle this just like we're part of your existing team. We're constantly providing monitoring and awareness of what's going on with the environment, and this happens 24/7, 365. And we spend a lot of money and effort to make sure that we have the best team, the best people, the best process, and the best tools. So what's your next step? Well, I dropped in the chat at the very beginning my Calendly. And if you scroll back up to the top of the chat, you'll see that. Essentially what this is to book a strategy session to kind of get an understanding kind of where you guys are. Maybe you are well on your way to making sure you get this stuff taken care of. Maybe you could use some help. But please use this link, right, to register. Don't go to our website. Don't send emails. Go to this link. This will get direct access to my time, and we can have a conversation about it. Any questions at all? We've got somebody that says, what if I am, it looks like an anonymous attendee, but what if I am just a one-person tax preparer? Does this still apply to me? Yeah, so the short answer is it depends on how many records that you work with in your firm, right? So the FTC has kind of put this 5,000 record, I guess, limitation or requirement, right? But the truth is, as I mentioned before, even if you are still underneath that 5,000 record limitation, I just think that that all of this stuff is still too important. Like even if the FTC did not require you to have protections in place to secure your information, and especially when it comes to your customers' personal identifiable information, I think you'd still want to do those things, right? So like even though we work heavily in the compliance industry, right, where we work with a lot of organizations that have to do these things, we still take that same rigor and attitude and approach towards cybersecurity for organizations that do not. Having a cybersecurity risk assessment is critical. You can kind of get an idea of like how risky you are, and then kind of go from there. Travis asks, are you seeing the insurance industry requiring these same requirements. Yeah, I mean, I I tell people, prior to maybe 24 months ago, I don't think I've ever had a conversation with a cyber liability insurance provider, broker, agent, right? Other than the process to renew our own stuff. But since then, it's a constant feed, right? Insurance providers don't want to be the banks for any of these things anymore, right? So as they cover organizations, it's becoming more and more difficult, right, to get coverage. It's becoming more and more difficult to get claims reimbursed. The requirements are becoming more and more stringent. The insurance companies don't want to be banks anymore, right? So the requirements that they're putting on their covered entities is getting much more complicated, disciplined, and complete. So 100% absolutely. So even if you aren't feel like you are part of this FTC safeguards rule, your cyber liability insurance provider may suggest otherwise. Another question, tax season is coming up. Can this wait till after April? That's probably one of the most common things is most of the CPA firms that we talk to, they're like, we've got so much going on. This is the worst time of year to be working on this stuff. And although I completely understand, this is actually, to be completely honest, the most vulnerable that you are as a tax provider is during tax season, right? The bad guys don't care that you're busy, right? But they do know that this is when you are getting all of the sensitive information, right, from your customers, and this is when you're at the most vulnerable. Besides the fact that it takes a while to implement these things, the deadline still is June 9th, and once that deadline hits, we are all unsure what that means if there is a data breach when it comes to punishments and discipline. Next question is, if we only can afford to spend a little more right now and had to choose between getting ready for FTC or getting cyber insurance, which should we do? Which should we do first? Well, that's a difficult question, right? Because I think both of those have to happen, right? Because what will happen is, in order to get your cyber liability insurance, you're going to have to do these cybersecurity controls. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get the insurance. It's a little chicken and the egg thing, right? I would say, you need to have these controls in place first to be able to honestly answer in the affirmative that you are doing these things that the insurance companies require to get the coverage. Another question is, do you guys work with insurance companies that help fill out the applications? We do. Obviously, it's primarily with the customers that work with us on our full managed services, and the reason why we do that is simply as a service, of course, to our customers. But often, even the questions that cyber liability insurance providers are asking on their applications, most business leaders that are running their companies aren't clear on exactly what those things are, right? What we've seen, over the last 12 to 16 months is this, the same insurance provider carrier, right, that maybe 12 months ago had a 3-page application, now has a 13-page application. And the reason why it's moving that direction is the providers are requiring more and more specifics, right? It's not simply a yes or no anymore on certain things that they want in place. It's to demonstrate and to prove that those things are. I do want to mention, for those of you that are interested, we are going to be doing a webinar in March with one of our insurance cyber liability insurance partners. Travis from Bowen and Associates. He's a longtime partner of ours. He's a fantastic resource. He will be we will be collectively doing another webinar talking about this stuff. So I would love for you guys to attend that. So look forward to that stuff. We'll keep you guys on the mail list for that. Anything else? One last question. Is there a cost for the FTC strategy session? Nope, absolutely not. 100% free. Hit my Calendly, set up 30 minutes and we'll discuss a strategy. No obligation or cost. Anything else? Amber, anything else you want to add?
Just a reminder that we did record this session, and we also have the checklist put together that you will receive via email as well, a takeaway for the steps of the FTC Safeguards rules. So you can look for that to come in your email. But in the meantime, definitely reach out to the link that Ken provided if you have any questions at all, and we're happy to work with you.
Yeah, and absolutely, I forgot. So we will be sending out that checklist. It's a great resource. And I also wanted to add to that, if you guys do sign up for a FTC strategy session and that leads to engaging with us, we will be waiving some of the onboard fees, potentially up to $2,500. Only if you sign up through that Calendly link, though. Anyway, I'm going to give you guys back some of your time. Appreciate everyone's participation. And again, please schedule some time if you need some help. Expect to see an email with this recording and that checklist. And everybody have a great day.